Welcome to today's explainer. We're diving into what is honestly one of the most poignant, shocking, and ultimately consequential moments in the entire epic of the Mahabharata. We're talking about Draupadi's Cheer Haran. Now, if you've ever wanted to pinpoint the exact moment where the ultimate clash between Dharma and Adharma became completely inevitable, well, this is it. It's a heavy story full of immense cruelty, profound divine intervention, and the absolutely massive cost of silence. All right, let's set the scene because the stakes we're dealing with here are just monumental. Picture this magnificent royal court in Hastinapura. What starts off as a seemingly simple, though, high-stakes game of dice, just spirals completely out of control. It's an event that didn't just cost a royal family their entire kingdom, it actually shattered the whole foundational understanding of duty and morality. This one single event, it's the spark that literally ignited the Kurukshetra War, the greatest war in history.
So, part 1, the deceitful dice game, or more accurately, Duryodhana and Shakuni's trap.
To really wrap our heads around this tragedy, we have to understand how this trap actually worked. Yudhishthira was bound by this strict, almost fatalistic sense of duty to accept a formal challenge. So going up against Shakuni's rigged dice, he honestly never stood a chance. And the disaster strikes so fast. First, he wagers and loses his immense wealth. Then comes the escalation. He wagers his entire kingdom and loses that too. In complete desperation, he actually wagers his own brothers and loses them. Then, in total defeat, he wagers himself. But Shakuni's trap wasn't done yet. Goaded by his opponents, Yudhishthira does the unthinkable. He wagers his wife, Queen Draupadi, and he loses her too. And this is where things just go completely off the rails into a horrific escalation of violence. Duryodhana is basically reveling in this deceitful victory, and he issues this vile command to his younger brother, Dushasana. He tells him to go fetch Draupadi and bring her right into the royal assembly. When she obviously refuses, Dushasana commits a shocking physical assault. He forcibly grabs Draupadi by her hair and literally drags her into the court. Keep in mind, this room is filled with the most powerful men in the kingdom. It is just a moment of pure, shocking humiliation. But here's the thing. Dragged into the center of the room, she doesn't just break down and weep. Instead, she fiercely challenges the entire assembly with this brilliant legal and moral question. She essentially asks, when Maharaj Yudhishthira had already lost himself, did he have the right to wager me? I mean, wow, she is looking right at the greatest scholars and warriors in the kingdom and asking them to define the limits of a husband's ownership versus the rights of a free woman. Basically, if a man is a slave and has lost his own freedom, how can he possibly have the authority to gamble away another human being? And the reaction to her question perfectly illustrates the true tragedy of this whole scene. The most revered elders in that room, Bhishma, Drona, and Kripa, they sit there completely paralyzed by this technical moral dilemma. They can't answer her, and they don't stop the assault. These are men of immense power and supposed wisdom, right? Yet they choose the safety of silence over defending what's right. Contrast that with Vidura. He stands up as the lone, courageous voice in that massive assembly, just fiercely protesting the gross injustice happening right in front of them. Which brings us to part 2, the disrobing attempt and surrendering to the divine. Because those elders remained silent, the cruelty was allowed to escalate to its absolute darkest point. Duryodhana orders Dushasana to strip Draupadi of her garments right there in the open court. Now at first, Draupadi fights back, physically, fiercely holding on to her clothing and her dignity. But then, she realizes that absolutely no earthly power in that room is going to come to her aid. So she lets go. She raises both of her hands in total surrender and calls upon Lord Krishna. And what happens next is a profound, miraculous intervention. The source texts tell us that Lord Krishna uses his divine power, his yoga maya, to answer her call of complete surrender. He doesn't strike Dushasana down with a lightning bolt. Instead, he transforms the very fabric of Draupadi's saree. He makes it infinite. Picture Dushasana, just completely filled with arrogance and cruel strength, pulling and pulling at the fabric. But for every single yard of silk he violently rips away, another yard instantly appears to cover her. Yards turn into miles of vibrant cloth, just piling up in the center of the royal court. He actually keeps pulling until his muscles give out, his breath fails, and he literally collapses onto the floor from sheer exhaustion. Draupadi's honor remains totally protected. Not by the mighty warriors of her family, but by her own unwavering devotion. Now, the atmosphere in the room immediately shifts from shock to just pure, unadulterated wrath. Having witnessed the severe abuse of his wife and the complete, utter failure of the court's justice,
Bhima rises, and he makes these absolutely terrifying, ironclad vows of vengeance. He swears right there before the assembly that he will slay Dushasana and drink the blood from his chest. And because Duryodhana had lewdly patted his thigh earlier to insult Draupadi, Bhima vows to completely shatter Duryodhana's thigh in battle. These aren't just empty threats born out of anger. These are the fatal promises that will dictate all the bloodshed of the coming war.
So the sheer weight and terror of Bhima's vows, combined with this undeniable miracle they all just witnessed, finally snaps King Dhritarashtra out of his blind complacency. Suddenly, the king is gripped by immense fear about the colossal adharma, the deep sin that was just committed under his own roof. In a state of total panic, he formally apologizes to Draupadi. He offers her boons. He immediately frees the Pandavas from their sudden slavery, and he returns every single piece of lost wealth and their entire kingdom. He's basically frantically trying to hit the undo button on this entire horrific event.
But as we all know, some actions just cannot be undone. And that brings us to the core takeaways from our explainer today. The source texts give us these timeless moral lessons from this one horrific event. First, the end of adharma, or injustice, is absolutely certain. It simply cannot sustain itself. Second, it highlights the profound theological belief that God will always protect a true devotee who completely surrenders, just like Krishna did for Draupadi. Third, and this is so absolutely crucial, it establishes that respecting women isn't just a polite societal rule, it is the very foundation of Dharma itself. When a society fails its women, the whole society fails entirely. And finally, arrogance and injustice, exactly like what Duryodhana and Dushasana showed, will inevitably become the architect of your own violent destruction. Which leaves us with a really heavy, deeply provocative thought to close things out today. How did the silence of the righteous in this single room guarantee the destruction of the Kurukshetra war? You see, it wasn't just the evil of the wicked that doomed millions of soldiers to die on that battlefield. It was the complacency, the technical excuses, and the silence of the good, capable men who sat in that room and just watched injustice happen without raising a hand to stop it. It's a chilling reminder for all of us that when good people do nothing, the resulting fire will eventually burn everything down. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped you visualize and grasp the immense gravity of this epic turning